Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week was an international break for Arsenal, as well as the most of the world, but don't you worry, we have plenty of stuff to cover, especially that international football topic I just mentioned. How you doing, Keith?
Hello, Dove. Happy international break. I hope you've been not watching soccer by continuing to watch soccer.
Yeah, basically. It was the beginning of my son's soccer season today. So this was the moment he's been waiting for the past 3 or more years. He finally got to play keeper in a real match, a sanctioned official match, instead of just at recess every day. So it went well. The way that our head coach is doing it is that he wants to have 4 keepers, 2 primary keepers that he switches between, and then 2 backup keepers for each of those primary keepers. So he played the entire first half and maintained a clean sheet over that first half. So congratulations to him. He acquitted himself well. There's still, we talk about the coach's dream where, you have a good result, but there's still plenty of stuff to work on. That's where we are with him, because there was definitely a few close calls. Some rattling of the woodwork, as it were. So there's definitely stuff to work on, but I'm proud of him, and we'll continue to do that. So,
well, we should say balls hitting the post is not actually a failure on the keeper's part. Arguably, it's a success, because the point is to get the ball around the keeper. If it hits the post, then you did your job, and
that's true.
Score.
He was lucky that the shots were off target, is why I'm saying that. He left big gaps that could have easily been exploited at the feet of a more gifted player. I shouldn't put down the players from other team.
Someone who's older than 7 is what you're.
Right, basically.
I figured that's what you meant, but I do want to, defend the honor of the keeper in the post there. I mean, as keepers will tell you, the post is not a goal. So
yeah, exactly. And I actually did cheer the other kid who was the head coach's son, who was doing the role of goalkeeper in the second half. I called out, good job forcing him wide, the one time that he did basically force a shot, to give him a goal kick. So yeah, no, definitely.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, so that was earlier today. We're just getting underway with that. That's a new thing. He's got a team full of kids who actually want to be there, which is a new thing. They're all into it, and it should be a good season. A lot of talent there.
Excellent. That's always when it does start to get to an age when they get a little more. We joke about the age, but they get a little more coordinated, and they can actually start to do some things. And the play gets a little more. There's a little more structure, a little more flow to it. I assume they are long past the stage of clumping, or everybody just follows the ball all around the field.
I wouldn't say long past. I wouldn't say long past. I mean, that's still something they need to work on. Yeah. We are now 7v7 at this level, right? So 6 infield players, or I guess outfield players, and the keeper. So yeah, that is still a big thing. They are passing some, they are spreading out some. It is a huge field though, so you really notice when they aren't covering it well. So yeah, but. Yeah, more to follow as that develops throughout the fall season. And this travel team, it is going to be the same team for the fall and the spring, keeping the same kids, same coaches together. So that's an interesting approach.
And and a nice segue into stuff about the international break. That does, you see that when you watch the international games, that continuity creates better play as opposed to these. With the club teams, obviously you have players you're practicing every week, things get better. With the international teams, sometimes you get a little bit of a hero ball, just a great player goes and does something, and that's how you win or lose.
Yeah, exactly. So a little bit of follow-up from our last episode. First of all, longtime listener, my father, wrote in with a little bit of follow-up. He did know who Ricardo Calafiori is. He wanted that on the record. So he just hadn't really noticed him doing anything significant in the past before he caught his attention during the last match. So that got garbled when I was hearing what he was saying live during the match, but I didn't want to unnecessarily disparage him. So yeah. You did know that much.
Soon the world will know who Calafiori is. I mean, probably.
The other thing that I wanted to follow up with you on is you were telling an amusing anecdote about how Arteta got COVID from who was it during the run up to the whole COVID thing?
The owner of Olympiacos,
Right?
Mr. Marinakis. I forget his
Right.
first it's probably Konstantinos. It's something very Greek, but Mr.
Okay.
Marinakis. Yes, that
So
was yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you about with that is you didn't say during the episode, and I listened back to the episode later just to see if I missed it. Was Arsenal in the Champions League or the Europa League or the Europa Conference League? What competition was that back then?
No, that was the Europa League. We were in that stretch. So Arsenal was a Champions League regular for basically the entirety of Arsene Wenger's reign in North London. His final season was the first year we finished out of the top four under him, and therefore went to the Europa League. We were in the Europa League for a number of years through the Unai Emery era, and then also the first couple of years under Arteta. It was also under Arteta. It was the COVID. Yeah, we were in the Europa League that year. The COVID season, we finished 8th. This was the summer restart where we finished the year in like July. But in that one, we finished 8th, but won the FA Cup, so got into the Europa League again. And then that season, that 21-22 season, we finished 8th again, did not win the FA Cup, and therefore we're out of Europe altogether. And that was kind of a reset moment, really, for Arsenal in a lot of ways. And then you saw that season was that following season, 22-23, was the one depicted on the Amazon All or Nothing documentary. The non-European season, and then qualifying for Europe in the Europa League when you joined the club. That was our first season back in the Europa League. We have since about to start a third consecutive season in the Champions League.
Well, it's funny you bring up when I started watching Arsenal play, because that is something that I wanted to talk about with you today. So I think it's a fun thing to do once a season or so for any new listeners and viewers that we've picked up in that time, to just kind of go over how this show got together, like what our origin story is, as it were. So why don't you start, since your part of it begins long before mine does?
Back in the mists of time. I mean, to go way back, because this is an international break, it's a good point to bring it up. I was a child of 9 years old during the 1994 World Cup, which was held here in the US. And so I was the perfect age to be entranced by the whole thing, as well as the US having a decent performance, given where we stood on the world stage at that point. From there, followed the US national team into college, and it was as a junior in college, I did a study abroad in the spring of 2006 in London, and through being in Islington, or that roughly about in Islington, and also having several Arsenal fans in the group, I started following Arsenal as they made their way to the 2006 Champions League final, which was a lot of fun. You're sort of living among the fans as that's happening. Was a really cool experience. Also ended up being the last season of Highbury, which is one of those things that I could get the significance of, but it's only in the after, years later, have I sort of kind of really comprehended all of that. Of course, you don't know; everything's brand new to you at that point.
Sure.
And that means this is my 21st season then. 20 and a half. I technically only followed them like from March of 2006. So 20th full season following Arsenal FC, by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. I still that. And also I'll add in I always kind of wanted to follow MLS, had difficulty getting in because you really do need a team to kind of grab onto, and I couldn't bring myself to root for a team called New York Red Bulls. I've talked about this before. I have a very high tolerance for the business side of sports, but New York Red Bulls was too far. That was just too far. As luck would have it, in 2013, they made the announcement that New York City FC was coming into the league, co-owned by the Yankees, a baseball team that I love and have followed for a very long time.
I don't think I knew that they co-owned it. I knew that they used the stadium. I didn't know that there was an ownership relationship there.
Yeah, I mean it was like 20%. So Manchester City owned about the City Football Group is about 80%. The Yankees own about I think got 20%. It's probably even smaller now. Although supposedly even though they're moving out of Yankee Stadium to a new stadium in Queens in 27, apparently the Yankees are still going to maintain their ownership stake. At least that's what we say now. We still got a whole other season before that MLS season before that actually opens. So I had season tickets for a year and a half and then moved to Houston, where I have kept an eye on the Dynamo, but also from afar watched the boys in blue win MLS Cup in 2021. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. So that's your history of soccer. Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, going back a little bit, so you and I met when your family moved back to the mid-Hudson Valley, where I still live now. Mm-hmm. You were in 8th grade. I was in 7th grade. And my family had just moved here also. So we were both kind of new kids. I think you probably knew some kids from when you lived here before, right?
Yeah, we won't go to the details. It's a little more complicated than that, but yes, I did know. I did know people.
Right. So, but I was completely new. So you and I met each other in the cafeteria, probably because we were in different grades. We ate lunch together and talked about Star Wars a lot, and friendship developed out of that. And we kept in touch over the years. You, as a college professor, would travel all over the country during your summer vacations when you used to have that time off.
Yeah,
and you would make your way up here, and we'd hang out for a while. And one year, we were talking at dinner, and I mentioned something about Ted Lasso, and you mentioned that you would be interested in seeing it, but you're not in the Apple ecosystem the way that I am, so didn't have Apple TV Plus, didn't have an easy way to watch it. You were hanging out with me for the week. We watched the first season together. I think it was the second viewing for me, but we watched that together. And I definitely picked up on that there was a lot that you were noticing that I wasn't, since I had stopped playing soccer when I was not too much older than my son. I was probably 11 or 12 the last time that I actually played soccer, never followed a professional team or the international game or anything like that. So strictly as a very small-time youth practitioner. So we watched Ted Lasso, and then I think looking at the release dates of Ted Lasso, I think it was probably not until after the second season came out, and I think we may have watched that together also or something. But at some point you said, hey, it seems like you like this Ted Lasso show. If you're interested in watching real Premier League soccer at some point, there's this documentary on Amazon Prime called All or Nothing Arsenal. And it covers basically the recent history of the team going into the season that was about to start. This was the 22 to 23 season when this was happening. And so that would have been after the second season was over. So maybe we just watched the first 2 seasons together. Maybe that's what we had watched that time. But so yeah, whatever it was. So I thought about it, and you said, by the way, if you watch that and want to watch Arsenal, all you need is Peacock, right? And you can watch all the games, and now I know that it's a lot more nuanced than that. But in my head, it sounded reasonable, right? Watch this thing, which I did on the train rides home from work. I caught up on those episodes a little bit and felt like I had a good handle on who this team was and what to look for going into it. And I started watching those matches from the first season and was just like cross-eyed with like trying to follow all the little questions that were coming up as I was watching this, just having not watched soccer ever and barely played it as a kid. And really, when I was old enough to remember, I was really only playing keeper at that point and not super familiar with strategy and tactics and anything like that. So I'm compiling this list of questions as I watch these matches, thinking in the back of my head, this might be a fun thing to do a podcast about. So whether it turned out to be a phone conversation with you or a show that we share with the rest of the world, I wanted these questions answered because it was something I was enjoying and wanted to learn more from you. So I brought it to you as such, like, hey, this might be a fun podcast. I would love to do a podcast with you. We've been friends for a long time. I think it could be a good conversation. Is that something you're interested in? And so you agreed. Wisely, unwisely, I guess that's up to you. Yeah. But we had that first conversation. I recorded it. We determined the title of the show during or after that first episode. I hadn't heard of the term Gooner before that first episode. And it kind of grew from there. We started doing the podcast weekly, and we burned through like my long list of questions, got slightly shorter each week, and eventually we got through all of them. The podcast turned into a YouTube channel that some of you are watching this on right now. And then eventually we started doing the shorts last year, maybe a little bit toward the end of the previous year. And that's really where I think most people who watch us are watching us on shorts right now. That's where the biggest part of our audience is. So that's been a wild ride. And of course, my journey with sports has continued to grow as we do the show. I mean, beyond, it's not just at Peacock, as it turns out. You need a cable subscription for some of the matches, and you need Paramount Plus for the Champions League, and back then Europa League matches. And guess what? You're going to end up getting back into baseball because you're just discovering that you like sports a lot more than you'd realized you did. And now I'm watching the Cubs all the time and going back to baseball parks. I've seen a bunch of soccer matches now. I've seen international and club sport matches. And sports has kind of taken over my life in the most pleasant way possible most of the time.
I'm trying to decide on the appropriate metaphor here. It's either that of a drug dealer, or probably more appropriate, especially for you and me, is to just to pull out a line from a character we both know that you've taken your first step into a much larger universe.
Reference acknowledged. So yeah, it's been a good ride. Thank you to everyone who's been with us for at least part of it, and hoping to share a lot more on this journey with you. So moving to the topics at hand for this week, there's been a little bit of Arsenal news that we want to get out of the way before we talk about our main international topics for this week. But first, and really, I'm only mentioning this because it's a little bit interesting, and because we actually did choose this topic as the show title for last week. So we called our show last week, They Could Grimsby You, talking about, you never know, in the Carabao Cup, we could have a League Two team eliminate us, like what happened to Manchester United. But because we'd talked about that, I noticed the Athletic headline from this past week: Grimsby Town fined for fielding ineligible player and win over Manchester United. It was relevant enough for me to bookmark the story. I use Apple News Plus for my Athletic subscription. And I didn't revisit it until just before we were recording. I figured, I wanted to talk about this. I should actually read the story and see what was going on. In my mind, it seemed like it must have been a huge scandal that this lowdown team won. They brought in a ringer. Who knows what the the machinations of this was. It turns out it's this player, Clark Oduor. It's so much less interesting than it sounds like. They signed him at like 12:01 midnight, like after the deadline, basically like 1 minute after the deadline. They signed him as a new signing to their team, which the FA and the league and whoever else needs to be was totally okay with that, except he was ineligible to compete in this EFL Cup competition. And as it turns out, he was the only player from Grimsby who missed his penalty shot during the penalty shootout. So far from helping his team in that regard. So it's just kind of a funny thing. And I learned apparently also that the football league, the EFL, is more lenient with player eligibility, where the team was assessed a fine, like a monetary penalty. I guess the same thing happened to Liverpool in the 2019 League Cup. The FA takes it much more seriously. When this happened recently there, it was Guernsey FC. This happened earlier this month, or maybe, I don't know when this was written, maybe even August. But Guernsey FC was actually expelled from the FA Cup competition for a similar infraction. So the Football League is a little more easygoing on that. And, to Grimsby's credit, they found this error and they reported it to the EFL themselves. And they said it's a computer error and it won't happen again. They've put some systems in place to make sure it gets caught or something like that. So, yeah, just a little bit of intrigue.
Yeah. I do imagine. I mean, obviously the EFL. So the football, the English Football League governs governs all of the tier 2, 3, and 4 competitions: Championship, League 1, League 2. But they also govern the Cup, and it is essentially made up of the 92 member clubs. So in a lot of, I imagine that's where a lot more of the leniency comes from, is that it's the clubs, in some respects, it's the clubs sanctioning themselves. I do think also there's a question of optics, that if they had, I mean, let's put it this way: Grimsby had eliminated another League One team, then I think it's a very different story. But because it was United, and I did see in the story there that United will not be appealing the decision.
Right.
It's like, that's for the best. I think it's.
Could you imagine them coming after if it's League Two team?
Yeah, right. But again, it's just another moment. I mean, really, the most important thing about this entire story is just to remind people that Manchester United was eliminated from the Cup by Grimsby Town. While their 80 million signing, £80 million signing, Benjamin Sesko was listed 10th in the shootout list, ahead of only the keeper, apparently.
Oh, wow.
But that's okay. It's not like he's a striker with a perfect penalty record in his career.
Sounds like you're talking about someone in particular.
Benjamin Sesko.
Oh, okay.
Him. Yes, him. He's not actually perfect. I think he's like 11 of 12 or something. But that's all very strange. I don't know. We talked a little bit about that. Well, we're not going to talk about United, and it just it's strange. That's all I'm going to say. It's strange.
Yeah. So I think we have the transfer window has now closed for the Premier League. Mm-hmm. We have some final news out of that, right?
Right. A lot of this is just sort of confirming stuff that we talked a little bit about was being in the works last time. We were, I think, a day ahead of the window closing. It was made official. Piero Hincapié of Ecuador has been signed from Bayer Leverkusen, a central defender, I believe, who's more comfortable on the right side, so probably a Gabriel replacement. He is he comes in. We talked a little about how his was tied. He's basically a replacement for Kivior, who's been loaned to Porto, and I don't remember if that was an obligation to buy or if it was an option or something. I forget the details of that one in particular, but Kivior is out, and I believe the expectation is he will not be coming back. Also out, officially sold, Albert Sambila Congo was sold to Hamburg in Germany in the Bundesliga. Quite a historic club, Hamburg. They've actually got a European Cup to their record, so not a terrible place to go. I guess I've never been to Hamburg. I've heard some mixed things, but hopefully Albert kind of finds his career there. It just simply never happened for him at Arsenal. Also going to Hamburg on loan, Fabio Vieira. So a couple of former Arsenal guys headed to Hamburg, to the north part of northern Germany. Reece Nelson is on loan now to Brentford. And then the last one, which is only interesting because of the way the schedule shapes up, Alexander Zinchenko has been loaned to Nottingham Forest.
Oh,
okay. Still plays on Saturday.
Right.
So we'll probably see him back again.
Might see him more than when he was with us toward the end of a season, at least. Well, yeah, I would say he played towards the end of last season when they didn't really have a choice. I believe he did score in the final game of the season last year, didn't he? Oh, maybe I don't remember. Okay,
I think he got the opener. I think Odegaard got the ultimately the winner. I think is what it was. Right. Anyway, not important.
Now, but anyway, Matt Turner is he still? No, he's not at Nottingham Forest anymore, is he?
No, Turner returned to MLS. I believe he's with New England, New England, which is where he was at Arsenal. Mostly because he just couldn't find playing time in the Premier League, and in the end, with the World Cup coming, he needs to play, and especially as a keeper. He needs starts, and he's likely to get that in MLS. I don't know that his European dream is completely over, but I mean, at this point, he certainly would not be in Europe for this European season. I suppose unless New England gets a really good offer from a club where he thinks he'll start over the winter, and then perhaps maybe after the World Cup, depending on how that goes. Currently, he's not the number one for the U.S. That would be New York City's own Matt Freese. But yeah, so he's looking. Yeah, I presume he's still looking. I assume he's probably still looking for that opportunity.
All right. So World Cup is just around the corner. Mm-hmm. What do we need to know about new qualification timelines and anything else that's going on with World Cup?
Well, mostly it's just worth bringing up because it's been a while since we talked about this, which obviously makes sense. The last the last international break during our recording schedule was in March.
Right.
There is an international. Well, it's not an international break per se, but there's a window in which international competitions are held, as well as friendlies, in the beginning of June. And so there were additional qualifying matches played for several regions there. And then, of course, we're currently in the September window. We still have 2 more this year in mid-October and then in mid-November. And then, which will be the final bit before we get the last. It's not the end of qualifying, but it's the end of most of qualifying because the World Cup draw will be on December 5th. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. But yeah, we should. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but we probably ought to at least check in on, as people may remember, we have a list of sides we're following through qualification.
Right.
And so it's worth just sort of picking up with what they've been up to since then. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, we should, definitely.
All right. So we'll start with Asia, because that was the order we did in. Japan is one we've looked at. Japan actually lost the qualifier. Their first loss in qualification came in early June at Australia, but then beat Indonesia to wrap up the top spot in Group C, which doesn't really matter because they had qualified back in March, but they were in the World Cup. That's it. That's the end of Asian qualifying for Japan. There are, however, apparently 2 rounds remaining in Asian qualifying in Japan, Asian qualifying for the World Cup. Let's see if I get this right. So they have set up currently the 4th round, which sees 2 groups of 3 teams each. The winners of each group will all 3 games, and they're only going to play each other once. So it's 3 games, 2 for each team, but 3 games in total, will all be played in the October international window. The winner of each group automatically qualifies for the World Cup. The runners-up in each group will play each other for a spot in the Interconfederation playoffs, which will be coming up, I believe, in March, which will be in the March international break. So, still more to come in Asia. But we should also add that means there are teams that have officially qualified for the World Cup from Asia. We had mentioned Japan. Hold on, I'm trying to find I've got things open in a bunch of tabs here, so give me a moment. Oops, that was the wrong one. There it is. Coming in, joining from the summer, we in alphabetical order. Australia is in, Iran is in, Japan is in, Jordan is in. Jordan is making its debut in the World Cup. Congrats to them. South Korea is in, and then also making their debut, Uzbekistan. So 6 teams have qualified for Asia. There are 2 more official spots, and then what they call a half spot due to the Confederation playoff.
If that goes all the way to March, that's getting in just under the wire if you qualify in March.
So what will happen, and I assume this is going to happen based on this is what happened in 22, when the draw is done, there will essentially be a couple spots left for the Interconfederation, the last playoff winners, and they will just sort of be slotted, and then as those competitions finish in March, the teams will officially be known. But the draw will be done, so you'll know what group they're in, and it'll just be officially confirming who those particular teams actually are.
Right.
So the group, and also their schedule and their travel plans, and so a lot of that stuff will kind of get worked out in advance, and then I imagine a lot of just like, okay, it's going to be Japan is going to do it, and so that checks a lot of boxes. So Japan has made their way in. They played 16 games in World Cup qualification in Asia, and then they'll have at least 3 more games in this cycle in the World Cup, probably more. Japan is pretty good. I expect them to qualify out of whatever group they're in, at least sight unseen, groups unknown.
Right. Yeah, something to follow. So we'll keep everyone updated over the next couple international breaks as news comes out.
Right. Well, that's Asia. Hold on. We have 4 more. Remember, we got a bunch of continents to go.
You're right.
Next up, because all the world's in it now, because we're less than a year away. So, Africa, the African qualifiers, they didn't play in the summer. They will be. They're in the middle of playing games now. Egypt was at home to Ethiopia, who they beat. They're in pretty good shape to qualify. Not official yet, but are pretty close. I believe they could do it as early as, I forget if it's tomorrow or Tuesday. I'm looking at a calendar. I don't remember. Tomorrow or Tuesday, they will play at Burkina Faso in the city of Ouagadougou. I definitely took that as an excuse to say it. I believe if they win that one, I think they'll probably officially have qualified. I think, actually. So Egypt is pretty close. We're also looking at the homeland of your brother-in-law, South Africa. Beat Lesotho, which in a game played in South Africa, even though it was technically the away game there. I assume it deals with a stadium issue of some sort in Lesotho.
Right.
They have one more game in this group, or excuse me, one game in this window where they will play Nigeria at home, a big one. Although South Africa is currently leading that group, they're actually in really good position to potentially qualify. I don't think a win over Nigeria would seal it. They still have 2 games left in October, but they're actually looking pretty good to qualify in that one.
Cool.
That's it for our teams in Africa. We should also mention briefly that Morocco has actually qualified from Africa, so they're the first African team to qualify.
As I recall, they went pretty deep in World Cup last time around, right? They made it to the quarterfinals or something, right?
Semifinals. Excellent run for them. But yeah, they've made it as far as hold on, let's see, African qualifying open. So we've got our groups. The winners of each group in African qualifying, there are 9 of them. The winners are automatically qualify. The runners up, the top 4, the runners up will play a second round, basically a 2-leg knockout in November, and the winner of that will go to the Interconfederation playoff.
Okay.
So that is Africa's qualification. So let's see what's next.
Yeah, which confederation do we hop to now?
Yeah, big one. North America.
All right,
CONCACAF, our home region, which we are not having to qualify in.
Right.
They started in June. They had some games in advance, qualifiers in advance of the Gold Cup. Costa Rica played the Bahamas and Trinidad and Tobago and won both of those games. They've opened this window with a draw at Nicaragua, which is an interesting result if you're Costa Rica. Meanwhile, they still have Haiti to play at home in a couple of days. The other side is Jamaica, who in June beat the British Virgin Islands and Guatemala, and then beat Bermuda the other day. They'll play Trinidad and Tobago on Tuesday. So in this instance, scrolling through, they're currently in the 3rd round of the group stage, where the winners of each group, there are 3 groups of 4, the winners of each group qualify for the World Cup, and then the second place finishers, the top 2, will advance to the Interconfederation playoffs.
All right.
Again, all of that we will know by the end of the November window. All right. Let's see. Yes. No, it is CONMEBOL next.
CONMEBOL, all right.
At least that's the order I've got these things written down. So CONMEBOL is almost finished. Yeah. They were the first ones to start. They will be the first ones to finish. The marathon South American qualifying will wrap up. We were looking at Colombia, who beat Bolivia, which snapped a 6-game winless streak for the Colombians in qualification. They beat Bolivia in Barranquilla, and then they will go to Venezuela for the final game later this week. Meanwhile, Argentina, the big story, had already qualified in advance. By the way, I forgot to mention Colombia in June drew with Peru and Argentina. That was in June. In June, Argentina beat Chile and then drew with Colombia, and then beat Venezuela the other day, which has been a game that made all sorts of news, as it appears to be, or at least is being treated as, the final game for Argentina in Argentina for one Leo Messi.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a little bit of a sort of a farewell atmosphere in the game in Buenos Aires. He, of course, also scored 2 goals because, of course, he did. They will wrap up qualifying in Ecuador later this week at the end of CONMEBOL's qualifying process, which is because they're at the end, they've pretty much wrapped up qualification. Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Ecuador, Colombia, and Paraguay are all in the World Cup. Congrats to all of them. Peru and Chile have been eliminated, and so there's one spot left. I'm sorry, actually, no, let me rephrase that. The only spot left is for the Interconfederation playoffs, and it is Venezuela with a 1-point edge over Bolivia as they head into the final game. We should add, just for completion's sake, at final match day, Venezuela will host Colombia, as we've mentioned. Bolivia will host Brazil. So, well, that'll be interesting. I don't really know how that one's going to play out, but that'll be interesting.
Yeah. All right. Now UEFA would be last, right?
Yes.
Alphabetically is probably the order this is going in.
Right. Well, I guess technically we should also mention Oceania, where New Zealand qualified back in November. So I said CONMEBOL was the first to finish. Okay, technically it's the second, but New Zealand is directly in, and New Caledonia awaits in the Interconfederation playoffs, which I feel like I named a lot of teams for that. I gotta look and see how that's supposed to work. I'm sure they don't know. It's FIFA. Anyway, quickly, as we look through our European sides, first, the Czech Republic has in June played 2 games, beating Montenegro and losing to Croatia. They then beat one away at Montenegro recently for their only qualifier of this window. They will play Croatia, Faroe Islands in October, and then Gibraltar in November. So tough. Well, Croatia will be a tough one, and then a pretty easy road after that. Italy opened qualifying in June in Oslo to Norway, where they got thumped by Norway. They followed that up by beating Moldova and then beating Estonia the other day. They will play at Israel tomorrow, where a game that will be played actually in Debrecen, Hungary, because, of course, there is the difficulty of playing games in Israel at this time. Speaking of that group, I'll also throw in one of your countries to follow, Norway. Norway is 4 for 4 in qualifying. They beat Italy and Estonia in June, and they will play their one qualifier of this window against Moldova. That'll be on Tuesday, and then have 3 more after that. And then the last country to look at was another one of yours, Denmark. Denmark has only played 1 game in qualification. They drew with Scotland in Copenhagen. They will play Greece tomorrow in Piraeus, and then still have 4 more games to go after that. So Europe is going to be basically finished with their groups at the end of the November window.
So how is qualification structured in Europe?
So there are 12 groups, because they have to do a very truncated form, because they didn't even start this until after the Euros ended last summer. There are 12 groups. Some have 4 teams, some have 5 teams. The ones with 5 teams have generally played a few more games at this point. The ones with 4 teams, of course, have fewer to play. But anyway, each of those 12 teams, the winners of each group qualify directly. The runners up all advance to a playoff, which is also kind of connected, at least potentially a little bit connected, to a team's performance in the UEFA Nations League, which I'm going to be honest, I don't understand how this works. But there's a bunch of teams that might be able to finish in third and still get into the playoff round because they're good teams in the Nations League, or they've had a strong performance in the Nations League. Which appears to be the semi-finalists. Because as I look here, it appears I see Germany. At least Wikipedia has written it. Germany, France, Spain, and Portugal. If they don't finish in the playoff spots, they still get a playoff spot. Unless they advance directly to the World Cup, they win the group and go directly to the World Cup. In which case, well, they're done. So make sense of that if you can. As long as they can figure it out, it's probably fine. But yeah, so Europe will be done and dusted. Well, I should say their Their main round of qualifiers will be, their first round will be done by the end of the November window, and then the playoff round, it appears, is going to be held in March, and it's going to be, this is the same as it was last time. It's four sets of 4-team brackets, and then by the end of March, they'll have the 4 additional teams having qualified for the World Cup.
Cool. All right.
So that's qualification. Again, as I mentioned quickly, there are 16 teams that have officially qualified. Again, just as a quick reminder, Australia, Iran, Japan, Jordan, South Korea, Uzbekistan, Morocco, Canada, Mexico, United States, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, and New Zealand.
All right. And at what stage of this all do we find out who's going to be in a group with us? I guess we're in Group D, it sounds like, because the groups of the 3 host countries are all known up front.
Well, which group we're in is already known in terms, and that's true. So Canada or Mexico will be in Group A. So typically the host is always placed as what they call A1. So they're in Group A, and then the rest of them are usually based on seeding, which we'll get more about later. Mexico has been Group A. Canada is in Group B. The United States will be Group D. And I'm sure there's a logistical reason why that it's been done that way. I don't know what it is. I was just told where the U.S. is going to be. So, but we'll see more of the draw. The draw will be held at noon Eastern time on December 5th. December 5th, noon Eastern time at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. There were rumors floating around that they were targeting us, Las Vegas. But no, they decided to go to the Kennedy Center, and I suspect at this point that the president will be in attendance, which isn't entirely unusual for an event like the World Cup draw. But I imagine that's connected to why it is in the Kennedy Center, why it's going to be in Washington as opposed to somewhere else like Las Vegas. And in the end, unless you're going, it doesn't really matter where it is. It's ping pong balls. It's kind of fascinating to watch, like as a spectacle, but not terrible. Like it's ping pong balls,
Yeah. So if all that sounds super interesting and you live in one of the host countries like we do and live reasonably close to a couple of the host stadia like you and I each do, or have family members near a couple of the other stadia like I do, when can we buy tickets and what does that process look like?
So this is what we know. Apparently, and this is what I read in my local paper, the Houston Chronicle. On Wednesday, September 10th, running through September 19th is a first application for tickets is open, which is strictly for people who hold a Visa card. That's not an immigration visa. That is the credit card company Visa, which is of course one of the sponsors of FIFA and the FIFA World Cup.
Right.
So they'll have their window through there. According to this, you put in your application, you fill it out, and then you'll be informed starting September 29th if you've been selected for the draw. And then there are time slots in which you're able to purchase tickets starting October 1st.
Okay.
So as I understand it, and this is coming from some people, this is sort of what I've also picked up from people who did something similar 4 years ago when it came to Qatar. Basically, this is what, like, the people who get in line for concert tickets and just sort of refresh constantly. It sounds like it's a little bit like that.
Oh boy.
But you'll be there, and you really don't know. And there are limits. You can purchase up to 4 tickets per match at up to 10 matches.
Huh.
So you can start, and I get the impression that just about everything is potentially open, including the final.
Right.
I will not be going to the final. I can tell you right now, I'm going to watch it on TV like most of the rest of the world.
Right.
The final, of course, being held in MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, in the Meadowlands. They do tell us that the most expensive tickets of the tournament at the start of the sale process will be over $6,000 for the final. The cheapest tickets available for group stage matches will be $60. But all we know is that that's the lowest potential price. For something called a Category 4 ticket, which I assume just means upper deck.
Right.
As far away from the field as you can be while still technically being in the stadium. They do have, and this is coming from FIFA, they do have, so the Visa pre-sale draw starts on September 10th. At late October, the 27th through the 31st, there will be another early ticket draw, which I assume is for everyone who doesn't have a Visa as their credit card. All of you losers with an American Express. And then it mentions that on December 5th is, of course, the draw. And then in mid-December, they will have a random selection draw, which I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that means. And then it says in 2026, quote, closer to tournament will be last-minute sales. And you can purchase, by the way, a single match ticket, a venue-specific ticket, or a team-specific ticket. So you can get one game, you can get tickets, packages of tickets at a particular venue, presumably one close to you, or you can get team-specific tickets and follow a specific team, at least during their group matches.
That's cool. We were talking before the show, and it looks like all of Team USA's matches will be on the West Coast, which is kind of a bummer for us. But
yeah, although I have to be honest, I wasn't really I wasn't expecting there to be any Team USA games in Houston in general. I also wasn't really expecting to get to a Team USA game. It's one thing to go, to buy tickets for the Gold Cup this summer, which I did, or to a friendly, which I've done. It's another thing altogether for a World Cup in the United States. So the U.S. is going to play 3 games on the West Coast, 1 in Seattle, and then 2 in what's being called Los Angeles, officially Inglewood, California, SoFi Stadium, which Arsenal fans know is owned by Stan Kroenke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I'm not going up there. Seattle is a fantastic environment for the game. I have been to a Sounders game. It is a good environment, and they didn't even open the upper deck, which I assume they'll have for the World Cup. And SoFi is, by all accounts, a spaceship, just a really excellent piece of engineering there in the middle of Los Angeles. Yeah, it should be interesting. I'm not anticipating to see the U.S. My understanding, based on how the bracket probably plays out, the U.S. is unlikely to come to Houston at all. But I am looking into one of the games in Houston. As much as I love watching the U.S., for me, it's more important, I guess, to be able to say that I went to a World Cup game. And I kind of don't care who's playing. I might take a little care depending on who some of the potential, depending on who the teams are, and also looking ahead. All the dates are known, by the way, so you can look up if you are near one of the host cities or are willing to travel to one of the host cities. All the dates are known. I do have some potential summer travel planned, and so I have to keep an eye out for a couple of dates as well. But yeah, I'm just looking at the list. If you're near one of these cities, that's how I'm approaching it. But I mostly because I didn't think I'd be able to do the travel to see the U.S. thing.
Right. Yeah. Me neither. So if you were considering doing this, so I guess a lot of people would be just kind of going in blind, whatever teams play, they get to see. But practically speaking, if you don't, let's say you do care and there's just particular teams or countries, nations that you would want to see play. If you wanted to wait until that is all known, like let's say that there's a quarterfinal match near you and you want to see who's going to be playing there and then buy tickets after that, will you be able to use StubHub or any of the other like aftermarket ticket sellers with this?
So I'm not going to speak authoritatively on this because I, of course, don't really know. But remember that we've talked a little bit about this. In the U.S., there's a very particular culture when it comes to tickets where we do a lot of these kind of individual resale through markets like StubHub, Game Time, SeatGeek. I'm sure there's a couple others floating around there where you can get, basically people trying to unload their personal tickets. that sort of thing, we used to call it scalping when it was a guy just on the street corner outside. I got 2 tickets here, 2 tickets.
Right.
That sort of thing does not happen in Europe. And FIFA is ultimately a European organization. So my understanding is that's probably not going to happen. I would not anticipate buying resale tickets for this sort of thing. And some of that's going to be connected to either going to be massive security perimeters around these stadiums at these particular matches. I think there's a level where it becomes difficult to do that kind of resale. That being said, FIFA has its own resale market, to make sure they get every dollar they can out of it. Fair enough. They have their own ticket market, which I've never attended a World Cup before, but I have been told by people or heard from people who had gone to Qatar or talked about being in Qatar that the system there actually was very efficient, worked very well, and they were able to sell, but to move tickets that they needed to unload some they weren't using or get tickets to last minute games. Now, obviously, Qatar is a little different because the entire tournament basically took place within the single city of Doha, and it was logistically possible to hit 2 or 3 games in a single day. That's not going to happen in the U.S. Just so everyone knows. But for the American perspective, I would not anticipate what we might call the usual ways of acquiring tickets. Not that there's anything illegal or wrong with StubHub. I use sites like that all the time. But I would be prepared not to do that. You're going to have to go directly through FIFA for this. So just be prepared for that, and also be prepared, to pay. The cheap seats, it seems like in the group stage, are $60. Supposedly FIFA will be using what they call dynamic pricing, where the price of game tickets will fluctuate based on various factors. I'm assuming also related to when people are buying their tickets as well. So it's the cheapest ones we know of, group stage tickets in category 4, which I'm sure is just, the top of the upper deck, are $60, and it's only going to get more expensive from there. I would be shocked if you're getting into the stadium for less than several $100s minimum. Mm-hmm. Just be prepared just mentally prepare yourself for that is really what I would tell people.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know how much I care about. I would love to, absent all other factors, yes, I would love to go, especially if I could see one of the, countries that particularly the US, but, Argentina, even if Messi's not playing, I've been following that team a little bit. I've seen them play before. Without knowing that ahead of time, knowing what a circus it's going to be, that I don't know. We'll see how it ends up working out. I'd love to, but I don't know that it'll work out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to see Messi. There's all sorts of conversations about whether or not he'll play for Argentina. Like if he will retire before then, he's playing in the World Cup, guys. Come on, let's just stop it. He's playing in the World Cup. We all know this. I'm not going to pretend otherwise.
Yeah. All right. So meanwhile, turning our attention to the U.S. Men's national team, you did go to a Gold Cup match over the summer, right?
I did go to a Gold Cup match. So I went out. Their second group game was in Austin, which is a couple hours drive. So I went out and went to the game. They played Saudi Arabia, which is an interesting opponent for what is supposed to be the North American Regional Championship.
Right.
Because of make up the numbers, and also because they're willing to spend a lot of money, the CONCACAF has invited teams in the past to participate, from outside the confederation to participate. We've played South Korea, Brazil, Colombia in the tournament. It's always ever been won by a CONCACAF team. It's interesting, even in the years when some rather strong South American or other foreign sides came in, they never won the tournament. And this time around, and apparently next time in 27, will be the Saudis are participating. And one of the leading sponsors of the tournament was the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the PIF, who had a very nice tent set up outside the stadium. They had a very nice carpeted tent with somebody playing music, and they had a drawing for people to take trips to Saudi Arabia. They were passing out dates and coffee, which I'm not a huge fan of Saudi coffee, I have to say, which I discovered when I was in Austin. But the U.S. won, and like most international games, it was 80 minutes of, kind of ragged play with a handful of exciting moments interspersed throughout. The key player was Chris Richards, the Crystal Palace defender who plays for the U.S. He, in the first half, a diving stop to deny a dangerous chance. I wouldn't say it was going to be a goal, but certainly a dangerous chance. And then in the second half, headed down a corner kick for the game's only goal. U.S. wins 1-0. That was exciting.
Nice.
Go USA. That was fun. It's fun to see the U.S. I think that is the 5th time I've seen the U.S. play in person. I think that's my 5th time. So.
Yeah, I saw for the Korea friendly that I think just happened this week. I thought that was going to be in the area. I think that was in Connecticut or something. It was someplace. There was something happening either now or in the next couple of weeks that was drivable to me, and I considered going, but the scheduling didn't work out.
Yeah, no, it was. They were yesterday. They were in what is now known as Sports Illustrated Stadium. It's funny because Sports Illustrated doesn't really exist anymore. But Sports Illustrated Stadium, which before this year was known as Red Bull Arena. So
okay.
In
so New Jersey,
Harrison, New Jersey, which is just a fancy way of saying not Newark.
Yeah,
it's just down the highway. If you drive down I-95, it's like another exit or two past the Meadowlands. Past MetLife. So it's right there.
Right.
It's just in that same area. I've been told it's a very nice arena, but it's very difficult to get. That's kind
not of knowing all that, only seeing that it was Harrison, New Jersey. It sounded so quaint. I think that's why in my mind I went to Connecticut.
Yeah. What you need mentally when you see that, what you need to have in your head is not Newark. That's really what they're trying to say there.
Yeah. So how did that end up going?
Not well. I admit I had it on in the background because I was trying to do some other things, and it's a friendly, so I don't really care. I have to say, the American performances under Pochettino since he took over as manager last year have been uninspiring. I don't know how much of that is him and how much of that is the general talent pool of the country, that it seems like a lot of the young talent that we had developing and growing feels like they kind of stagnated a bit as a collective group. They haven't advanced much further. Some of that's been injury related, but it was not what I saw was not a terribly inspiring performance. Now, post game, Pochettino made several comments to the effect of he thought the U.S. was the better team. I didn't watch closely enough. I'm not going to make fun of him for saying that, because I know that's the easy response. I didn't watch the game closely enough to really say that. I did see some moments where we generated some things and just kind of scuffed it in the box, but we're kind of there creating chances, whereas the Koreans buried 2 of theirs. I did also see several instances where they were able to get a turnover and basically slice right through the midfield and create chances. Heung-min Son, the former Spurs man who now plays for LAFC, was a problem, which is to be expected. He was probably the best. He probably was the best player on the field for either team. Certainly in terms of his, in terms of what he's accomplished as a player. Christian Pulisic, who has won a Champions League, is probably the only one who's really in that category. But I think, and for all the success he's had at Milan, I think Son's record at Tottenham is in some ways probably a little more impressive overall, but
and certainly his international stature is higher up there.
Certainly it's been uninspiring. So we'll have a friendly on Tuesday against Japan. Again, these are the teams we want to play. You want to play teams of this quality because we don't have qualification to go through. We made it to the final of the Gold Cup where we lost to Mexico, but Mexico was also by far the best team we played, but our roster, was kind of a second tier for the Gold Cup. I just don't have a really good sense of this team and how good they are. I feel like they could be better, but at some point you stop having room for improvement and you're just kind of who you are. It's an interesting environment. Also, of course, if you had gone to the friendly yesterday, you would have made a lot of new Korean friends. That was a Korean home game, which is a thing that happens for the U.S. in a lot of ways. it's just kind of the nature of the U.S. national team and where we fit within our own sports ecosystem, as well as internationally. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I don't. It's hard to read too much into friendlies because there are also plenty of instances where teams perform poorly, say some warm-up friendlies, and then show up in the World Cup, and all of a sudden they're in the quarterfinals. Now, of course, those are can be teams like France or England, who are have stocked with top-tier talent and have legitimate thoughts of winning the tournament. But it is a little disappointing. You'd like to see a little bit more momentum heading into the World Cup next summer. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully Japan goes better, or the friendly against Japan goes a little better, and then just hold on. I want to look up real quick. Who do we have in October in that break? The U.S. will play. Ecuador and Australia. So another couple of World Cup teams. So
right.
These are the kind of teams we need to be playing well against. Heading into the World Cup. Ecuador game will be in Austin. Probably not going to drive out for that, but
all right. Well, that kind of leads to the natural question: if American players aren't doing so great in the international game, and specifically going abroad and playing for more prestigious international clubs, what can we do about that? I mean, I know that there's a phrase that U.S. Soccer uses and USA Lacrosse uses, like all these federations, like locally for our local representatives of the sport for the more niche sports in this country. They talk about growing the game. How do we do that? What are some ideas on the table for that?
Oh man. We could do an entire podcast series on all of that. What's wrong with U.S. soccer? So there are efforts being done. I mean, one of the big differences, frankly, is just the size of the country. That this is a physically massive country, and also in terms of population, a massive country. Compare that. Yeah, as an easy point of comparison, would be a country like France. France is the same size as Texas geographically. Now, obviously has more people than Texas, but certainly not as many as the 300 plus million in the United States as a whole, and the continent spanning size of the country. So, but France also has generally a relatively uniform system of development. From youth upward, French players are generally developed the same way and go through roughly the same systems. And England has something similar. Germany, Spain, all these countries have these systems. A lot of them are also fed into by the clubs. So, I mean, in Spain, a good chunk of the Spanish national team has its roots as youth players in La Masia, which is Barcelona's academy. There's so many different. There are a lot of very similar ways where players are developed through these particular countries that doesn't exist in the U.S. in spite of the best efforts of U.S. soccer. And you and I both read the piece from The Athletic this past week on another new vision for youth development. I say another one because, as they point out in the story, this is the kind of thing that seems to happen regularly. Every time someone new shows up, there's a new vision that we're going to try. And it's hard. It's really hard to do because the U.S. has done so much development of the sport in the U.S. is grassroots in the sense that it has come from it's very much more decentralized, and so you have all of these different interest groups who are approaching the game in different ways. Ideally, the further down the pyramid you go, the age pyramid, the greater emphasis should be on the development of the players
instead of
the results of the game.
Right.
Now, any kids will tell you, kids, of course, keep score. They know. But a lot of it should be about the development of skill, because in a sense, by the time you're 18, you've already developed, you can't pick up new skill level, that you can't just sort of develop these basic tactical abilities but that's not the kind of thing you get here. If you were a young player, say, we talked about like Eberechi Eze, for example, at 9 years old, or, Saka joining the, Arsenal Academy at 9 years old. I mean, there he's getting a very particular form of training. Now, some of that does exist in the U.S. through the MLS clubs, but there are 30 MLS clubs, which is basically 30 million people for each of them. Good luck. Or I'm sorry, 10 million people for each. Like, there's just no way, and that's accounting for the fact that, like, assuming you were connected to one of those MLS club academies, they have exclusive rights to different sections of the country. And if you don't live close enough, then you're kind of stuck. Tyler Adams, for example, grew up near where you are in Wappingers. And he was in the New York Red Bulls Academy. So now you imagine you're driving to, I know for you geographically, you can picture that driving to the Meadowlands.
Like a 2-hour drive each way, maybe maybe a little bit closer to an hour and a half, but still, yeah.
Right. There were a kid in Cypress, Texas, where I live. I'm a suburb of Houston. So to get to the Houston Dynamo would be doable. But, assume the Houston Dynamo didn't exist. The next closest team would be FC Dallas. That's 4 hours up the interstate highway.
Right. And that's in contrast, the article was talking about, like, in England, every kid in England, they said, is within, it may have been 10 minutes, but even let's say it's 15 minutes of an academy that will train them up to the level where they could be expected, if they have the talent, like that they could be playing for the Premier League when they get older. Like and 10 to 15 minutes away for every child in all of England.
Right. And then there's elements of this, there's a uniformity of the coaching standards too. Like, there was back a decade ago in the growth of Iceland, they basically decided we're just going to spend a whole bunch of money on this, and anyone who coaches has to get a coaching badge up to a particular level. You almost can't do that in the U.S. because you have so many kids, but just not enough coaches. I mean, how many of them are coaches? I know you have the lowest level coaching license, right?
Yeah, I have like a level D certification or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's true for everyone that is going to stand across the sidelines from you, when you're there with your kid, right? I mean,
yeah, and also what he was talking about is there's so many different organizations all across the country. There's like 54 or something different associations for youth soccer clubs that some may do that, like mine does. Some may not require it, and it's just a hodgepodge that's been thrown together.
And a lot of that even stems from things like you have to pay for the course. There's, you get access to it again. In a state like New York, you can have regional areas, but and here I am in Texas. Like, okay, if it's in Houston, that's fine. But if I'm out in, I don't know, Huntsville, Texas, which isn't a small town, it's a decent size, small city, but it's a couple hours north of Houston. Do I really want to spend a couple $100 and drive into Houston for one day just so I can stand on the sidelines and point at my 8-year-old and his friends? I can, and who's there to enforce that? Right. Each state has its own set of rules. You haven't even gotten to some of the travel ecosystems where some of the, these are teams that play teams in travel to play teams in other states. People are talking about the high school development paths, which, at their point, when you're with high schools or other levels, like, if you're a coach at a high school, your job is to win. Now, granted, you're dealing with 16-year-olds where the level of skill level is theoretically a little different. It's just there are so many different avenues and different ways people get into this that it's a lot. And it sounds like Matt Crocker is doing it the best way possible in terms of how he's trying to get buy-in from as many people as he can. But boy, that's a lot to do. That's a lot.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully he's in the position long enough to affect the changes that he's talking about, and he can make a dent, because that would be great. I mean, it's something that can kind of be embarrassing sometimes as a U.S. soccer fan in a way, right? There was something, I don't know, by this point, it's probably a couple months ago. There's a podcast I listen to called Dithering. It's co-hosted by John Gruber, who writes about Mac stuff that I follow, and Ben Thompson, who runs the Stratechery blog that talks about Apple, but other technology companies from a kind of financial standpoint. But they do this podcast together, and they were talking because of the connection to Apple having the MLS coverage. They were talking about Apple has been in talks for forever for like trying to get rights to NFL games and more a wider variety of sports, maybe increased MLB coverage. They have the Friday nights, but maybe they want Sundays or something like that instead, or in addition. And he contended, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. He contended that the MLS is basically as popular as it's ever going to get because we don't have the best players in the world. You can buy a Messi like when he's kind of almost in retirement, but that we don't have homegrown players. We don't have a high number of the best players in the world, and we basically never will. Right. And so to him, it's a dead end. Like, it's not going to get bigger, but it is. How do you feel about that?
I mean, the obvious answer is that in the long run, anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see I don't see a reason why in a truly extended time horizon, we're talking maybe 20 years or longer even, that Major League Soccer in the United States couldn't possibly reach that kind of level. I mean, because the U.S. has a lot of things going for it. Obviously, the country's own economic strength, the strength of the currency, the infrastructure connected to the stadiums and the clubs. I mean, the standard in MLS is rather standard. Almost all the clubs are relatively equal in terms of the facilities you're going to get, the quality you're going to get. I mean, compare MLS stadiums to, say, England. Like, obviously, you look at the teams at the top: Arsenal, Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Anfield and the cathedrals of the game and all that. But you also have, Brentford Stadium doesn't look that different than any MLS park. I mean, remember Luton a couple of years ago? I mean, like Portman Road for Ipswich last year. Like, some of these are really kind of rinky-dink. Like, they're, even Craven Cottage, which has gone a lot of renovations. Like, Craven Cottage wouldn't be out of place in MLS in terms of its size. And every MLS team has at least a semi-decent, if not really fantastic stadium, to say nothing of the facilities being built behind them. Really, I think the thing we're looking for in MLS is, when do they financially feel comfortable taking off the brakes? Because they have been financially limited, the salary cap, all the various financial rules. There's still residual memories of the North American Soccer League from the late 70s and early 80s that collapsed because they basically spent themselves into oblivion. I don't know. I think it's going to require. Yeah, that's an interesting question. The idea that it's at peak popularity, I don't believe that's true. I think there is. I think there is room for growth. I think as we sort of see, and I hate generational talk, but like Generation Z, as they start to become adults, what kind of impact does that have? We're already seeing different sports leagues try to figure out ways to sort of change the marketing of their product, moving into different environments or broadcasting things in different ways. If MLS is able and willing to get creative while also opening the financial spigots for players, I mean, it is going to MLS now has a lot of parity. That's going to open it up because there are some clubs that are going to spend a lot of money. LAFC does. Miami clearly is. Atlanta has generally been a high spender, and then you're going to have clubs who don't spend a lot of money and generally struggle. So I guess the question is, when do we get to the point where they decide they're going to try and compete financially with the rest of the league? And truth be told, they're already pretty good. Like, it's a pretty quality league overall. It doesn't take far to go into some of the second tier of European leagues, and outside of their top teams, your Ajax and PSV in the Netherlands, Sporting in Porto in Portugal, Rangers and Celtic in Scotland. the quality dips pretty precipitously after
right.
after those big
very,
teams.
very top heavy. They have like one or two, and then the rest are also rans.
Right. Yeah. So it's and Europe has its own problems with the financial disparities between the top clubs and the rest of them. That's an issue they're going to deal with too. I think the other thing too is I think you need the youth system to sort of break through and get a few more of those really American players, because they're also the ones who are going to be more likely to say, no, you know what, I will stay. You're probably going to see a lot more South Americans as well, and MLS has done a really good job tapping into Argentina in particular. Been a lot of good Argentine players, some Brazilians. Brazil's a little different. There's good South American talent. It's actually done a lot, by the way, to help the development of a lot of other CONCACAF nations, because their leagues are, really sort of struggle financially, especially in the Caribbean, but Central America as well. So they've been helped by having a stable league, a stable competitive league to be in. So is it peak? I don't believe that, but to see into the future of all the different permutations that can take, I don't think that's impossible. I think there's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then, but it's, and again, who knows? I mean, Major League Baseball always worries about its fan base getting older. The NFL is king, but is that always going to be the case? I don't know. Things don't change until they do. So
right. Maybe Gen Z will pick up soccer as like the big thing.
Yeah, although you can flash back as far as the 70s, where the joke has always been that soccer is the sport of the future, and it always will be.
Yeah. What's coming up for next week?
Right. So the Premier League's back. Enough of this sort of out there world stuff. We're back to the Premier League. Early morning for us. Saturday at home against Nottingham Forest. Last I saw it was supposed to be USA Network. So we'll take on the trees and get used to this long week, by the way, because from here, at least until like mid-November, we're 2 games a week, baby. Here we go. It's about to pick up fast.
Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can also listen to the podcast version of our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to tell one friend about our show. Ideally, someone who likes soccer or football, but we're not picky. We record the show using Zencastr. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our socials. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
And remember, New York is blue.